and thank you for joining us for the announcement of the winners of the AJ Student Prize 2020. I'm Rob Wilson, Architecture Editor of the Architects Journal. This is the third year of the AJ Student Prize, for which we invite every RIBA and ARB accredited architecture school in the UK to select and enter their top 2 student projects, one at undergraduate level and one at postgraduate level, as well as an outstanding project focused on sustainability for the Sustainability Award. We're delighted to say that this year, despite all the challenges of an academic year finished under lockdown, we had a record number of entries from 54 schools, and the range and standard of the work was excellent. On behalf of the Architects Journal, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our founding partner, Marley, for supporting the prize. Without your support, this would not be possible. And I'd also like to thank our wonderful judges for their time, expertise, and knowledge. Our full judging panel consisted of Kieran Machel of Karakusevich Carson Architects, Edmund Fowles of Field and Fowles, Adiam Setsu of AKT2, Pippa Nissen of Nissen Richards Studio, Harriet Harris, Dean of the Pratt Institute School of Architecture in New York, and Sophie Pelsmakers, Assistant Professor in Sustainable Architecture at Tampere University in Finland, who joined the panel for Sustainability Award. I'm delighted that some of our judges will be participating in a short discussion a little later on, reflecting on the work they saw and the qualities that stood out for them in the judging process. And if you'd like to ask them any questions, please do press the Q&A button that you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen during the discussion. Now, we'll be revealing the winners of the AJ Student Prize 2020 in a few minutes. But with so many of you listening in who at present are starting out in practice, we've asked one of our judges, Pippa Nissen, founder of Nissen Richards Studio, to share her own perspective on practice and her top tips on how to stand out from the crowd and break into the architecture industry. Pippa.
Thanks very much, Rob. Right, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. So hopefully that's working okay. So thanks very much for asking me, second year in a row, to give my top tips. Of course, they've changed a bit this year because it's such a challenging year to leave college and look for work. And I sort of thought about, I left architecture school at a very difficult time in the 1980s. And so I thought about what advice I would, as my 52-year-old self, would give my 20-something-year-old self, and I've thought about it a bit. So just very briefly, a bit of context in terms of who we are. So Nissen Richards Studio is a multidisciplinary practice. So we work in theatre, exhibition, sort of installation scale work, as well as architecture. So this is hot off the press. Well, actually, it's not in the press yet. It's our Sutton Hoo tower that enables people to really understand Sutton Hoo by climbing up and then seeing the burial grounds below. So with that context of where I'm coming from, my 10 top tips when you're leaving college in terms of how to get work and in an interview, and then when you're at work. So first of all, really importantly, is there's unlikely to be the perfect job straight away, and that's okay. I mean, I put this slide up because actually it was in 2009 that I feel as if I got my perfect job. So I was 40, and actually it took until then to really understand who I was, you know, understand my kind of voice. And so it's okay that you can go and gather lots of different experience that can really contribute to, you know, thinking about your career as a kind of long arc of where you're aiming to get to. And finding a job, okay, write a short bespoke letter and CV to people you actually want to work for. So this is something that I think it's almost worth batching your CVs into perhaps 5 at a time, so that you can really research and really write bespoke letters. So a few things that in our office go straight in the bin. So dear sirs, dear sir or madam, dear hiring manager. I mean, to me, that feels like, you know, kind of writing to Barclays or something. You need to make it about the people that you're writing to. You know, I really like Wheeler House and the way that light falls across the space. You know, the idea of the cut and paste letter, we can see through that in architecture practices where the font changes so that you can see that actually somebody's just looked at your website and then has kind of cut and paste something in. So it's much better to maybe go to their news section, see something that's just opened and be kind of quite current about it. I mean, I would actually start every letter from the beginning so that you're writing it bespoke for the person. It also means you can avoid another very irritating thing that means that the CV goes straight in the bin, which is, and in summary, that's why I want to work for Hawkins Brown. So this idea that the practice name is incorrect, we do actually get that a lot. That's another cut and paste issue. So I really enjoy the way that Nissan Richard, so really be careful about spell check. Just make sure you get the name of the company right. That is something that also just really irritates. So another thing to watch, I think, is that perhaps, you know, you've written a 5,000 word dissertation and then the conclusion is actually a kind of climax of all of this, of all your thinking for the last 2-3 you know, years. But actually make the language really simple and straightforward, and appreciate that people are looking at it incredibly quickly. I would also avoid things like kind of, you know, funny witticisms, you know, stop, look no further, I love theatre. Actually just write it in a simple way. So my next slide showing, well, I actually think this is more important than the CV itself. So a well-written, short, bespoke cover letter is as important as the CV that follows. So we sometimes will interview someone based on their cover letter because actually we want people in the office that are really professional and people that can write very clearly and communicate clearly. So for example, in our practice, you know, dear Pippa and Jim, write it to the directors of the practice. I first came across your work when I visited Sutton Hoo, you know, something very direct and straight. So only put in images that you love. Better to put in less work than even one image that isn't quite right. So I think carefully about what images you're going to send, because actually, if there are some weak images, it really sort of undermines the rest of the portfolio. So I would say better to put in 5 really good images than sort of 25 images that you're not quite sure about. So finding a job, it's okay to be persistent. So sometimes we miss the CV. I know it's very difficult at the moment because lots of practices are working from home, but it's worth sending your CV, resending it perhaps to a different person in the practice, phoning up. I mean, I would normally say go and drop off a CV, but maybe it's worth phoning and checking. But on that note, it's only okay to be persistent up to a point. So these are all actual phrases that we have got in the last couple of weeks. You know, have I said something wrong? Are you getting my emails? Why are you not replying? Bear in mind that people are incredibly busy and, you know, you mustn't overstep that mark of just coming across as a bit rude. The interview. Architecture offices are businesses. So I think these are all real examples of things that people have said. So the thing that irritates me and Jim, the other director, is when people will come and start talking about almost collecting experience from you. So I am looking for experience in housing. So for us, that feels as if they're kind of ticking off experience and they're not really committing to us. So even if that is the truth, I would just avoid using that phrase. So similarly, I want to be running my own business in 2 years. I've identified your practice as having the kind of projects I need. I mean, just really think about from their point of view, is that something that they want? Someone to come and, you know, work for them and somehow copy their style. I mean, even if, again, if that's true, think very carefully about how that sounds, how that feels. Will I be running my own projects independently, as I don't want to be told what to do? I only want to work on retail projects abroad, or I really want to work on high profile theatre projects and small scale art installations. I mean, again, quite often what's on the website, there are a lot of other projects which are about, you know, keeping the practice afloat, and just think, you know, you might get to work on these projects, but it's better to get into the practice, get to know everybody, and then you'll start to, you know, if that works well, then you'll start to get these incredible opportunities. So in yellow in the centre is the perfect response in an interview. I'm flexible about the kind of work that you can offer me. I am passionate about housing, but also really enjoy all kinds of different projects and tasks, as I understand that I can learn so much from other people. This is exactly the kind of office that I would like to work in. So when people say things like that, you sort of, we're on your side, and that we understand that you understand that architecture is a business, and it's a complex business. So if you can't find an architecture job straight away, self-generate projects and collect other transferable skills. So I would imagine that that is incredibly important at the moment. So if you're not able to work in architecture, you know, don't worry, and actually but keep going, keep thinking about architecture. So, you know, there are lots of amazing blogs and websites out there, or start your own website, or write an article, send it to the AJ, or perhaps go, you know, find a site that's close to you, make up an imaginary brief and a project, and draw it really beautifully, and supplement your portfolio so that actually you can keep adding to it. And this is something I mentioned in the office, and I probably irritate people when I do, but so when I left, I was in the middle of you know, the 1980s recession, and I worked in a bar for most of my 20s and call centres. And I have to say that I do mean this, I learned more working in a bar and call centres than I did in some of the architecture offices I worked in, because actually it's about getting on with people. It's, you know, someone being difficult and managing that situation. I learned about business and, you know, how to keep a business afloat, how to keep people happy. So don't worry if this, you know, whatever you end up working in, it all is contributing ultimately to your career. And at the same time, I went back to art school. So after my degree, I then took 3 years. I did a foundation, then I did an MA in theatre before completing my architecture, and actually, you know, do keep up with kind of new challenges and new skills. And I also did a sort of series of hilarious projects with an opera director. Well, she was studying opera, and actually now she's just had her first opera at the E&O, so that's the long game. But, you know, we did it for no money. And some of the experiments that we did at the time, I still think about. It's almost like my voice started in those early projects that I was just doing for myself, because I was trying to find my voice when I was working in places that didn't really respond to, you know, what I needed at the time. So if you can't find an architecture job straight away, diversify. I mean, this is something within our practice. I put this slide up because actually, you know, we started as an architecture exhibition cultural office, and then we started working graphic design because there was a natural progression. We started doing branding, we started making films, or actually working as a contractor so that we can create work ourselves. And I think that's just, you know, it's important to think actually that architecture degrees and the MA is a really broad design education, and actually it enables you to really branch out and work in lots of different ways. So think about that. Process and ideas. So take risks and find your voice. I guess this is a more general point, whether you're generating your own projects or whether you're starting to work in practice or working in another discipline. So Pinterest, I do love Pinterest, but it also becomes this way that you're sort of constantly recycling ideas. And actually, I think this is an opportunity when you leave college to really find your voice, and find your voice, you know, without tutors telling you or, you know, advising you. Think about what is your voice, and, you know, maybe it's worth going back to the pencil sketch, or experimenting in different materials, different processes. Make sure that all through your career, actually, this is something that you're trying to do. Don't go back to the metaphorical plan chest and recycle those details. Actually, every time that you're designing something, it's important to kind of start from the beginning. So you get a job in an office, hit deadlines. I mean, I haven't got any other images or text to this. It's just so important. So I would say it's more important to hit a deadline sometimes than come up with, 10 ideas, because actually, again, architecture offices are businesses, and we totally rely on our clients' continued work. And actually, if we don't hit deadlines, it all falls down. You can also anticipate that, and we don't mind at all in an office when somebody says, a week's time, I'm not going to hit that deadline, can you help me? Because actually we can then do something about it. I think the worst thing to do is to come to a meeting and you don't hit a deadline. So you get a job in an office, people, again, actually the whole profession is about getting on with people, whether it's your colleagues in the office or it's contractors. Getting contractors to do what you want is a difficult and challenging thing sometimes. So think carefully and, take your time. And I guess my final point is enjoy yourself, because, it's a fantastic and broad subject, architecture, and very enjoyable. It should be very enjoyable. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Pippa, for those valuable words of advice. Now, I'm sure you're all eager to find out who the winners are of the AJ Student Prize 2020. So let's get started. Let us begin with the undergraduate category. The judging panel commented on the breadth and quality of ideas and the impressive levels of presentation across this category. Reflecting this, the panel decided to award a highly commended in this category. And the highly commended is awarded to Joshua Burge at the University of Sheffield for the Canal and River Trust Headquarters and Museum of Water project. Congratulations to you, Joshua. The judges noted particularly the maturity of this entry for an undergraduate project, which stitches together a very compelling scheme on a difficult site. They also noted the impressive visual representation, particularly of the scheme's interiors. And now, on to the winner of the AJ Student Prize undergraduate category. And the winner is Eugenia Kakli at the University of Strathclyde for the project St Mary's Shelters. Many congratulations to you, Eugenia. The panel commended this scheme for its ambition and sophistication and how it demonstrated real typological intelligence. They particularly liked how the project puts forward a whole strategy for social issues and the way the different functions within the scheme are played out over multiple layers and levels. So next up is the postgraduate category. The judges were impressed with the extremely high level of skill, development and resolution of the projects in this category this year. And so we have our second highly commended of the afternoon. And this is awarded to Jacques Doody from Cardiff University for the project Dreamland, Samson. Jacques, congratulations. The panel thought that this was an amazing piece of work with an impressive attention to detail, one packed with nostalgia and lyricism. They commended it on how its playful graphic style sidesteps conventional architecture narrative. Now, on to our winner of the postgraduate category. Our winner this year of the AJ Student Prize postgraduate category is Shawn Adams from the Royal College of Art for the project Plinths and Tapestry. Many congratulations to Shawn. The judges really loved the breadth of work demonstrated in this project, which not only innovatively explores a range of sustainable principles looking at textiles and e-waste as a construction material, but was also commended for its powerful sense of restraint and its incredibly beautiful visual representation. Indeed, coincidentally, we used one of Shawn's images for the cover of our AJ student issue in July. So now we come to our final category of the day, the Sustainability Award. Given the range of entries for this award, we asked our sustainability editor, Hattie Hartman, to help draw up a shortlist for this category. And the shortlist was Bryon Chan, Birmingham City University, Guru Vold, Glasgow School of Art, Kyle Crosley, Leeds Beckett University, George Spendlove, Newcastle University, Rian Samir, Queen's University, Belfast, Sharil Bentenku Abdul Kadir, University College London, Bethany Hurd, University of Greenwich, and Sam Jones, Phoebe Smith and Ryan Stevens at the University of Liverpool. Again, due to the quality of entries, the judges decided to award a highly commended in this category. And this is awarded to Bryon Chan of Birmingham City University for the project Cultivating Communities. Bryon, congratulations. The panel said this was a very broad, laudable and believable project that tries to do as much good as possible. And they agreed with the tutor's citation that accompanied it of it being a quietly radical scheme. And now, on to our final winner of the afternoon. So the AJ Student Prize Sustainability Award this year has been won by Sharil Bentenku Abdul Kadir at the Bartlett College, London, for the project One Tree Manual Towards a Better Timber Architecture. Many congratulations to you, Sharil. The judges commended this project as an extraordinary piece of work, one that started from a delightfully simple idea, but which explored and realized this with a sense of architectural poetry, particularly through a series of very beautiful models. The project, said one judge, expands the bandwidth of sustainability and reminds us that you don't need to do something expensive to achieve a sustainable scheme. So massive congratulations to all our winners and all those who entered the AJ Student Prize 2020. We're only sorry not to be able to celebrate with you in person. Now, some of our esteemed judges are joining us for a short discussion, giving their thoughts and insights into the judging process and what stood out for them in the work they saw. So I'm delighted to be joined by, I'm just seeing who's around, who's...
We're here, but we have the video conundrum.
Ah.
Yeah.
So can everybody, oh, there's Pippa. Just wait till see if everybody can.
Oh, yay.
But maybe. Okay. There might be some other judges joining. I'm just seeing if oh, yeah, sorry, I'm just adjusting my screen to see if everybody's great. So I'm very pleased to be joined by Sophie Pelsmakers, who's Assistant Professor in Sustainable Architecture at Tampere University in Finland. Kira Majhale, who's an Associate at Karakusevich Carson Architects. Harriet Harris, who's Dean of the Pratt Institute School of Architecture in New York. And Pippa Nissen, who's joining us again, co-founder of Nissen Richards Studio. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm glad you all made it. So I just starting off, I just wanted to start by asking you for your general thoughts on the quality and range of work seen during the judging process. I don't know if you want to start, Harriet, or...
Sure. I mean, I guess congratulations everyone, first of all. I'm sure you're very excited, and we're very excited about your work. I think one of the things that is super exciting about being a judge is really looking to you to be the barometers on what the future of architecture is, that we learn from you about the trajectory of the industry at large, just the construction industry, but also very specifically architectural futures. So it's a bit like consulting an oracle, looking at your projects and imagining what would happen in society if these were to be made real. I think generally, I think for all of us, we were impressed by, I would say, a renewed interest and emphasis on the process and not just the product. So all of you put enormous energy into really not only telling the story of how your projects were conceived and developed, but also really understanding the value of that process in itself as a standalone piece of architecture. And in some cases that was really outstanding, particularly in the winners in postgraduate. So I think also one of the things that struck me in particular, I know the other judges may have similar views and other views too, is, for those of you doing projects with a social agenda, seeing that the integrity of those projects, not as being in a way just symbolic of a sort of civic aesthetics, which is simplistic or basic, but actually there was an understanding about public projects having a right to an aesthetic integrity. And I think that was really striking, again in the winners, but more generally in the way that all of you approach this all the time, in a way with a kind of business agenda underpinning all of the projects, with some thought to how do these projects, whether it involves barges or beads for that matter, what's the economic proposition as well as the spatial one. So the idea of you pulling in from other disciplines to enrich your narrative because of this integrity of inhabitation, but also affordability was really striking too. And it's great that you've had Pippa encouraging you to all set up your own practices, because absolutely that's what you should do. You're far too good to be mere employees. We want to see you all becoming employers very soon and running innovative niche new businesses in architecture. So I know we're short on time, so that's my initial comments, but congratulations again. It's really exciting work.
Thanks, Harriet. I don't know who wants to follow up. Kieran or?
Yeah. Yeah, well, again, well done to everybody. It was really encouraging to see the amazing quality of work, actually. And I think, especially during these really challenging times, I think there's always a worry that, being disconnected from your tutors and your studio groups could have a really big negative impact to creativity, but that was not evident. I think, actually, it was really good to see the amount of creativity coming out from the students. So I think, well done to everybody for that, for not necessarily being impacted. Well, you may have been, but it wasn't, it wasn't demonstrated within your work. So I think that's brilliant as well.
Sophie, if you had any thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to be one of the judges. I only had the pleasure to look at the sustainability shortlist, along with the other judges as well. And I think the quality of drawing and seduction and the skills the students have has been just really blown me away. But of course, for sustainability, we really try to look behind that seduction in that sense. And I think you summed up the latest category in the prizes really well. So I won't go into that, but our view was really in the judging that we really took it from the point of view that climate crisis is real and we need real solutions and a certain urgency. And that was really expressed in the projects that won. But I also had a little bit of a concern, or rather a big concern, that behind some of the seductive projects, there were also some real problems in which a lot of the projects have fantastic intentions to solve the world and to really fix the climate crisis, but actually they often ended up contributing to it, unintentionally so. And that's because often they had these grand ideas and making grand structures that weren't necessary to begin with. And I think that's also reflected in the projects that did end up winning. And so I would really encourage all of the students and teachers and schools to really get engaged with this real issue, and that we, of course, every design project is speculative, but also really pushing the boundaries of what that means in sustainability terms. And there is a reality there that we need to do a reality check on, and we need some energy literacy skills as well to make sure that these projects are really sustainable as well. But what was exciting from the ones that did win, they were very architectural, very holistic, covered a lot of aspects, and really used sustainability as a driver of their design all the way through. And that was very visible, rather than something that was added on top of it. But I'll shut up now. So.
Pippa, I don't know if you want to add anything to, or just thinking about some of the key qualities that stood out for you, or key issues that came out of looking at the work.
I mean, yes, just to echo the other judges, congratulations, everybody. And, I only wish we could have awarded more prizes, because there were lots of, really fantastic work. I mean, I think I particularly enjoyed the projects that showed the range of both kind of high tech and low tech. So I think the power of the model, that you can see the hand of the maker and that you get a kind of quality of craft, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but there is a sort of personality there. I think that's really shone through, I think, in the kind of winning bunch of projects. And I think it's probably something to, I think, reflect on, is how the how it's affected, how the pandemic's really affected those last couple of months, and in terms of moving forward in your career, that sometimes the power of a sketch or a kind of quick model or something gestural actually can speak volumes, as well as the kind of perfect visualization that kind of looks like a photograph.
Yeah, I was wondering if any, just to remind people that if you'd like to send in any questions, there's go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A box or button there, so please press that and type in your questions if you have any questions for the panelists. We can take some at the end. So yeah, just on that point about the situation we are in at the moment, I was wondering if anybody else had any thoughts about whether the situation we are, the lockdown or the COVID crisis, sort of, you saw some of that feeding into the work you saw, or just reflecting on that context of producing work at this time for students.
It was interesting that we didn't really talk about it at all, actually, on the judging day. And I think we sort of commented at the end, isn't it extraordinary that we didn't talk about it, because actually the work, as Kieran, you were saying, didn't really seem to be affected.
That's not, of course, to underestimate just how much effort has been put in. And I think this is also just a shout out to the professors and the tutors, who are obviously your mentors, your advisors, your conflict managers, your maybe even your kind of points of departure if you didn't necessarily get along, because often that can be a fuel for creativity. But you've all come from schools from across the country, which was great for us. We didn't intend it that way. We really did look at the integrity of the work. And we're really encouraged to see that, even within, different contexts, there's all kinds of ideas coming forward right now. There wasn't a default to making anything about a pandemic spatial proposition, which indicates just that all your projects were clearly compelling and immersive for you, that you were profoundly engaged in your work. And in a way, all of that stuff going on was a distraction that you didn't feel the need to kind of head off into. And that's a real testimony to just how dedicated and focused you've been through what I can imagine only as being incredibly trying times for all of you. And what's interesting about your work, and obviously AJ will go forward and publish it and feature your work, which is great. Other schools look to see what kind of the benchmark, in a way, that you have set as a group of winners and commended students, because you are going to not only inform practice, because practitioners will be reading this, looking to see what's up and coming, drawing inspiration from your work, but also for pedagogues, for professors who are setting briefs right now for the academic year. You're giving them a very strong message about your values, what you think matters in terms of your educational experience, its content and its process. So, you are up here with both the architects and the academics leading the field. So congratulations again for taking on the authority of that position.
I don't know if you, Sophie or Kieran, have any thoughts about just the situation now, in advice in a way for students or people setting out on their careers at this point. Any good advice you can?
Well, perhaps if, oh, sorry. I
No,
just
you
wanted
go.
to, yeah, is it okay? I just quickly wanted to follow on to what Harriet was also saying with regards to sort of setting the benchmark in the sense of the current discussion and where things are going. And I think particularly on the projects in sustainability, I'm very excited about that as well, because it's sort of, as you said, it's not about expensive propositions. Sometimes you can be very ambitious and then in the idea and in the resolution of it, but actually some of the solutions are very simple and rather well crafted and still seductive and beautiful. And I think sort of those projects and the way that they were generated from this small seed in sustainability and taken all the way through from the program, the function into then actual the design, but also then the detail. I think that's really super exciting. And I would really like to see this be quite influential for other students taking this forward. And as Harriet also says, also the professors and in practice seeing what the power can be of sustainable aspects. It doesn't have to close doors. It can actually open a lot of doors in creativity. And I think that's what the winning projects do. I think with regards to practice, I've been out of practice, traditional practice so long myself, and I'm also now based in Finland, and the situation here is quite different actually. Yes, we have been in lockdown. Things have been since March actually online as well. But a lot of practices are still running as normal or as normal as possible. A lot of projects are going ahead. A lot of my students are incredibly busy. They often work alongside studying. But I think it's really about this self-critical attitude to the practice that we have and our role as architects that is really now in high demand, alongside then sustainability knowledge and energy literacy and carbon literacy issues. So I think if students really can apply themselves to that and then have some of these kind of a range of skills that is both seductive drawing, but also still, as we heard before from Pippa, these sort of well-crafted projects and some kind of sort of handmade things and investigations. I think that's sort of what is really in high demand, at least as I can tell in the Nordic region.
Yeah, and Bob, just to kind of answer the previous question, I just want to say, obviously at the moment it's quite difficult times, and that's only really in the short term, so don't see it as a kind of long-term impact to yourselves. There's probably 100 students applying to the same handful of jobs, but don't see it as a reflection of your skill or ability, because actually, there's global impact to the industry at the moment. I think it will be good, instead of worrying and stressing, to take the time to use to kind of look at some of the skills that you've got and try to enhance them. So look at things that you really enjoy doing during your studying. If there's like certain aspects of it that you'd like to try to explore more, so take the time to maybe look at things like the environmental sustainability issues and try to make yourself more of a value to potential employees by looking at things like passive house and whole life carbon and all those things that at the moment we don't necessarily have as many skills in that as a country, I would say, and these are the types of things that we need those skilled people. And also looking at BIM and Revit and how you can look at plugins. These are all things you could do in your own time. Data visualization, these are all areas I think that are quite emerging areas that students can quickly tap into and be quite valuable. So as well as spending time to enhance your portfolios, which a lot of time you don't get a chance to do, I think it's good to use that time to explore different routes potentially into slightly different jobs. So don't necessarily look at a linear route to your career. Take detours and deviate slightly, and you might realize that actually you might not necessarily want to take that linear path. You might kind of deviate into something that you would find more passionate and enjoy more. So I just wanted to say, don't worry, because there's not a right or wrong way to get to the end. Out
of interest, did you take a devious, not devious, but did you take a non-direct path to where you are now, or?
I think mine, in a way, slightly. Mine was quite elongated, and I started. I left university in 2008, at the beginning of the kind of recession, And for me, I was like, oh no, it's the end of the world. I can't find a job in the area I wanted to. But then I ended up working in Birmingham, and I loved it so much, and I stayed there for so many years, and it's an area that I'm really passionate about now. But beforehand, I would never have thought of kind of going and looking somewhere else. So I think sometimes it may not, at the time, it's not apparent to you that actually it could positively impact your future career. So I think just have an open mind and see what happens, and don't be downing yourselves for not being able to quickly get a job or the type of job that you want. Be open to different opportunities and create opportunities, like Pippa said. I think that's really useful. Create opportunities by enhancing your skills or networking, talking to people, and being open to explore other things.
And if anybody else had any thoughts on that, on the first steps, or even
well, first steps is obviously to go to the pub.
Sorry?
Yeah, first step is to go to the pub, because obviously I miss pubs terribly. New York bars are rubbish compared to pubs, and celebrate all of this. Obviously, socially distanced in bed before 10 p.m. and all of that. But just to say that I think I don't want to sort of end on a kind of dud note, but I think that you are facing extraordinary challenges, and it's very hard, actually, I feel, from me anyway, to offer you advice, because I don't underestimate the scale of the challenge you're facing. And I think it's just an acknowledgement of that, really, which is why I'm reluctant to sort of say, niche market creation and all the other neoliberal kind of sound bites that I'm sure you're having thrown at you by a ton of people right now. One thing I would say, though, and it's just something I've put a lot of time into investigating through research and other means, but there are many people with architecture qualifications leave architecture and come back. They do other things for a bit. It's actually quite normal. I mean, Leslie Loco became a novelist for a decade, and now she's the dean at CUNY in New York. So, I think it's really about thinking more broadly about what architecture can do for the problem rather than what architecture can do for you. So how do you take this skill set, which is, if you like, really rich? Because if you think about architecture, it's the love child of all these conflicting epistemologies, right? It's a bit of human sciences, it's a bit of social sciences, a bit of maths, it's a bit of biology, whatever, and then somewhere in the middle of this kind of like torrid relationship between all these kind of like polyamorous epistemologies, architecture is situated. And in a way, that restlessness is an inevitability. So we have an understanding of what architecture is at the moment, but now you're in this position to kind of push at the boundaries to really redefine what it can do. I can't imagine how hard that will be if you're limited in terms of your income, which may be to do with your background, and I'm deeply sympathetic. And I just want to hold that space on that note, because I don't think we often give credit to those of you who've probably done your work and won this competition despite having 3 jobs and a ton of debt and goodness knows. So there's a huge acknowledgement on our part of all of that labor that's kind of invisible, right? It doesn't come out in the portfolio. But I do think, it's about thinking about expanding the boundaries of what architecture is. So bring in your architecture intelligence to different projects. At the end of the day, when jobs finally recover, your employer or whoever will interview you, and the first question they're going to ask you is, what did you do during COVID? They're going to want to know how you were creative and imaginative, and all of you have evidenced so profoundly in all of your work in this competition that you are incredibly tenacious, creative, brilliant problem solvers. So it's taking the intelligence you've already established through the process of these projects and really applying it to the next challenge, which is getting a job. But that's not to sound glib, that's just to make you feel confident that in a way you've developed through these projects the muscle memory for innovation. And I just want you to feel, as you walk away from our crazy random download in the Zoomverse, that we are watching you. We're not just going to watch you for the next edition of AJ that you feature in, but we're going to be watching you throughout your career. You've got all of us excited. I think the readers of AJ are going to feel the same. So, and I'm sure your professors will consider you memorable in all kinds of ways you already imagine, and probably those that you don't. So again, huge congratulations.
So we got a few questions coming in. One actually relates to that aspect of first steps. It's from Richard Wolfe. Would you advise students to look at working for manufacturers and contractors who are connected to the construction industry rather than the traditional architects and design consultants?
Or can I answer that one?
Yeah.
I would say absolutely, definitely. I think it's, we always really pick up on that actually in a CV if somebody has worked for a contractor, because I think it just gives you such a broad range of solving problems. And if you have that knowledge as you then start to design in the future, I think it can only enrich the architecture. So I think that would be, you know, a very good move. Just to say also, in terms of practice at the moment, it's certainly in the cultural sector that I work in, that actually it is a real time of reinvention and reflection by our clients. And so actually thinking about how things are made, thinking about flexibility and sort of rethinking the way in which things are done is, you know, is a very useful skill.
I might take another question here. So, when preparing portfolios, should one look at more models or more digital designs, or is there no particular order, or, you know, way, what forms of representation? I think that's the question around.
I could answer this. Pratt's very formalist historically. If you look at our Instagram account, it's like goodness knows how many sumptuous models. I think at the moment, for students who are working possibly in their bedroom, not everyone can afford a domestic 3D printer. What defines a model is a really expanded territory now. So I think you can work in some ways in Shawn Adams' work. We saw him working with motherboards from old computers, so he's hacking existing materials. And I think just also thinking about, you know, Sophie's work, if you've not investigated the work she does professionally, you really should. It's really encouraging that sometimes architecting is about kind of unarchitecting. It's about working with what exists rather than generating more matter. So I think that utility of what you find and being super creative about what constitutes a model is great. I also wouldn't put it as a binary between digital versus model, because I think there are whole other mediums available to you, whether it's filmmaking, comic books, you know, forms of sculpture, other artistic practices and so on, that, you know, we often find as judges, and we all do a ton of judging, that just love seeing that kind of playfulness, that ability to work in a really sort of synthetic way between lots of different forms of expression, and really invigorate often what starts to get a bit, you know, samey in architectural expression, especially from mainstream practices. So, you know, be the disruptors. I think that's the way to look at it.
I think it also very much depends on the project as well. You know, I don't think there's one answer for that. It depends very much on the style of the project, what the project is, because certain projects just suit better certain types of media. So I think, you know, that there's no real answer for that question.
Could I perhaps jump in as well? Because I actually have another thesis tutorial with one of my students here in Finland, and I just came out of one before joining the meeting. And there's a discussion we often have, and I think there's two parts, isn't there? That you use certain tools for your own learning and design process. And then some of those you also use to communicate your work to others. And I think that often we focus too much in architecture education and in portfolios on the communication to others. And when we just use digital tools, when we do that, we often skip through processes in our own design. For example, I noticed that students who actually never make a physical model, they get the scale out of whack a lot of what they propose, where they're working on. And so I think for me, it's actually using all the tools, as you can hear what others are saying, all the tools that are available to you and different ways of working to investigate your own design and this iterative process. And then it's a question later, how do you best present that process? I mean, I've worked with students who worked with cardboard models in sand to see how water might move on the Cuban seafront, you know, versus an actual physical, a computer model, because it was easier for them to study and quicker to do. And then they used that as small thumbnails and made like lovely little sketches over it, on top of it. So it's actually about this sort of creative way of thinking about your own work. But for me, the more interesting question is the design process and the tools you use through that enable you to think differently and explore in different ways. And then ultimately how you then communicate. I think a variety is always good if it is about employment, but it's also about what you enjoy and how you work. You know, and I think that's really crucial. You finding your own way and how you work with different tools is really important. So it's an attitude towards your work, I think, is more important than the actual tools that you use for me.
I mean, I'm a real fan of the kind of messy model. So a model that you can kind of rip up and try things out, and you can kind of get a sense of scale. I mean, in our office, we have a kind of rule that if we do a kind of 3D model on the computer, we also do a 3D model, physical model, because actually you just need to keep going between them. And so they kind of really work well together.
Yeah, you can investigate things in a physical model that you cannot do in a digital model. I totally agree. So, but I've noticed that there's a fashion towards people are almost not making any physical models anymore. And yet I think you can still use it as an output tool. And on the sustainability category, obviously one of the students was powerful models all the way through to investigate from material quality to the scale to actual the spatial quality as well, and the architecture. And I think that's something that would have been very difficult to convey through a digital model, actually. So yeah.
We have got a question here from one of our highly commended, actually, from Byron Chan. What first steps can students and graduates take to improve their energy and carbon literacy skills?
Come and sit in some of our workshops. We did an embodied carbon workshop earlier today with our students, which was some maths. Yes, I think you just, there's so many events now with ACAN, Letty as well. So get engaged in some of that debate and those discussions. And there's so many online kind of tools you can look at. Feel free to contact me. I can give you some direction on that. But we particularly enjoyed actually the fact that you were trying to sort of include some of that quantifiable stuff, and that you both had sort of the technical and the architectural, and you even made some of your diagrams that were quite technical, quite beautiful, and communicated really quite well what you were trying to do at those different aspects. So you're definitely, I think, on the right path in that sense, definitely.
Yeah, there's an overabundance of information out there at the moment with, you know, being in lockdown. There's so much content on Zoom and just generally on the internet. So I think there's so much opportunity to learn right now. I just wish I could join all of them, but I don't have time.
Yeah. And just a shout out for in Finland, Aalto University with Yale University did a really quite cool decarbonizedesign.com free course that is particularly about embodied carbon and whole life carbon, that goes through and teaches you how to do that. Loads of short video recordings and clips as well, but there's many more that are actually really helpful. And ideally, of course, you get taught this in architecture school.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. I think we're, unless there's any more questions, we're gonna, we'll probably look to wrap up there. I don't know if anybody's got any last words of advice for students, but I think we'll probably wrap it up and say thank you so much. Thank you so much to Sophie, to Harriet, to Kieran, and to Pippa for joining us and giving us their insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, and well done everybody again. Yeah.
And well done AJ for valuing students' work in this way and recognising all of their labour. I think it's a fantastic prize. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye. Stay safe.
Yeah.